so we've talked about how to form the preterite tense. We have also talked about verbs that when you conjugate them in the third person, they have three vowels next to each other, what to do with those. We've talked about stem changing verbs. There is a whole other set of irregulars, and if you remember that when a verb is irregular, that means you're either adding you're not adding the ending that you would expect to add. Like if it's an AR verb, there's a set of endings that go with AR verbs. You wouldn't be adding those endings. The endings you'd be adding might be slightly different. Or there's a change to the stem or some combination of both. I think the bulk of these irregulars tend to use these endings, which are a combination of your ARs, ER, IRs, and I'll show you. Okay. So here again, you have, these are your AR endings, these are your ER endings, these are your IRs. These irregulars, poder, poner, querer, tener, venir, estar, saber, hacer, decir, and dar, are all going to use these endings right here, which if I actually, if I actually take these endings and move them over here, you will see that they do not match the IRs completely, nor do they match the, here, if they go right here, these guys do not match the ARs or the IRs completely. You can see, let me just put this so we know these are the ones that we're talking about. You can see that it has an E on the end like ARs would, but then it has ESTE like ERs and IRs. And then it has an O like the ARs would, but then it has an IMOS like the ERs and the IRs would, and it has an ISTEIS for vosotros like the ERs and IRs would, and an IERON like ERs and IRs would. So the endings that you're using for these irregulars is a combination of AR, ER/IR endings, so that makes them irregular because poder clearly ends in ER. It should have these endings, but it's going to have these endings. They're also irregular because, as you can see, the stem has changed, and unlike stem changers, where a stem change only occurs in the third person singular and the third person plural for él, ella, usted, or ellos, ellas, ustedes, in the preterite tense, these guys' stem change happens throughout. So if I wanted to conjugate poder, what I would have is this: pude, pudiste, pudimos, pudo, pudimos, pudisteis. Move this over just a little bit. Pudieron. Okay, so you can see that the pud, the stem change, I kept the stem change throughout. I kept the stem change throughout, where when I was dealing with mine that are classified as stem changers, the stem change didn't happen throughout. I used my regular stem for yo, to, nosotros, and vosotros. Okay? So that would be poder. I could also do poner, which would be puse, pusiste, puso, whoops, pusimos, pusisteis, pusieron. So again, you can see how, let me just get these moved over. Okay, So again, you can see how I kept my stem throughout and I added this set of endings. So they're irregular because they're getting an ending that's a combination between the ARs and the ERs, and I've got a stem change that I've kept throughout, okay? In addition to that, let's see, hacer, if you conjugate out hacer, you would end up with a C next to an O if I didn't make a spelling change right here. And the problem with that is that C next to an O sounds like a K instead of a S. But we have hacer, hice, hiciste, hicimos, hicisteis, hicieron. If I left this as a C, which is what the stem dictates that I'm supposed to leave it as, I would have ico, but I want hizo. So for the third person, the stem that your hacer gets in, it uses these irregular endings, and then the stem changes from HAC to HIC, but in the third person singular, you're going to change it to HIZ to keep the S sound. Decir has, its stem was DEC. Its stem becomes, when we start putting in the preterit tense, DIJ. When you have that DIJ, you drop the I that would be in the third person form. And I think this also would apply to traer. So if ever you end up with a stem a stem that has a J in it in the preterit tense, if it's an irregular verb that it's the irregular stem that you're using has a J in it, you're going to drop the I, because see, you're supposed to have an I-E-R-O-N, but you drop the I and just have E-R-O-N. And then dar is irregular. You're going to have to memorize dar because it all that makes dar irregular is that dar ends up using the ER endings instead of the AR endings without the accent marks. And what I like to do, and they didn't give you this one, but I'll show you. Dar and bear look the same in the preterit tense, and they didn't give you, bear is not really irregular. A lot of the smaller verbs just do not take the accent marks when you conjugate them out. So bear, since it is, here actually let me do this, it is an ER verb, this is its stem, and this is the ending, and this ending just lets us know that we're going to use these ER verbs over here. We're going to use these guys. Okay, so if I start conjugating out bear, the stem is V, and then if I look over there for ER verbs, I should be adding an I. Whoops, not an accent mark, I. And then viste, vio, vimos, vistes, vieron. So if you know how to do bear, dar and ear are exactly the same, just dar has the D on the front because obviously its stem is a D, and bear has the V. And so since bear is more or less normal, you just don't put in the accent marks. If you can do bear, then just change all your V's to D's, and then you can do dar. Okay? There are two more irregulars that you guys need to get to know, and they're actually spelled the same. They're completely irregular, and you're just going to have to memorize their spellings completely. It's ser and ear, and they actually are spelled the same in the preterit tense, and it's context that lets you know whether you're talking about ser or you're talking about ear. Okay, so for the yo, it's fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuisteis, fueron. Let's just kind of line that up a little bit better. Okay, and so if I said, for example, ayer fui al supermercado, okay, or Or in 2002, George W. Bush fue nuestro presidente. So you can tell in both of these, I'm using these conjugations, but you can tell here that I'm talking about went. Yesterday I went to the supermarket, whereas here I'm talking about was. In 2002, George Bush was our president.